Now, Jonathan Muir wants me to say something very nice about salmon. I won't, but Scott Mackenzie will. And he will show you. No, joking aside, I actually quite like. No, I don't. But Scott,
be honest, Charles. You're a trout fisherman.
I am.
Yeah.
But Scott is going to take you through some of the casts that. I mean, I've watched Scott down the years, and I think when he came to, I think it was Broadlands, was one of the first times.
Yeah, somewhere like that.
It just took our breath away. His understanding of the cast was just extraordinary, and with him, our wonderful JT, who probably does like salmon a bit.
I like salmon casting.
Oh, there you go. Right, on that note, I'm gonna leave it.
Thank you, Charles. No, I love salmon casting. I love the art of salmon casting. I get a lot of pleasure out of chucking a salmon rod.
Yeah,
particularly seeing it going a long way.
Absolutely, it is. And so here we are, day 2 at Sportfish, the virtual show, which was a great success yesterday, and so far today it's gone really, really well. The weather's kinder to us today as well.
For sure.
With a strong wind into our faces yesterday, so it was authentic if nothing else, that's for sure. Yesterday we talked quite a lot in depth about the different products that Mackenzie do, and as much as we do everything from a 8'6" 3-weight right through to 15-foot 10-11 weights nowadays. So I think there's something like 40 rods in the range, and we've got lines to match every rod as well. So I think today we'll talk a wee bit about fly lines, because you probably get asked more about fly lines than anything else. You'll be the same here, JT.
A bit of a minefield for a lot of people, trying to work out the difference between what's a traditional long-bellied spey, a slightly shorter spey, a mid-spey, or a shooting head Scandinavian style, or a Skagit. Which one do I need? What's the difference? How do I fish them? It's a minefield that people ask all the time. So yeah, it'd be great to give the information to clear things up for people, make it just a little bit easier for them to make a decision going forward.
Yeah, exactly that, because what fishing tackle isn't that cheap, let's be honest, but it's even dearer if you buy the wrong thing and it sits in the cupboard, doesn't get used, which
we've all done.
We've all done. So we'll go through today. I've got 2 rods set up, 2 of our FX1 graphene rods. This is the 6-piece Atlas rod, which is a very, very popular rod. It's probably our biggest selling rod nowadays. I'll just move that, JT, and we've got 2 rods here, and we've just managed to slightly tangle them. But what we're doing is, what you found I was a gillie in Scotland for over 20 years, and what we found was that up till recently, unless you had a big 15-foot double hander in your hands, you almost weren't a proper salmon fisherman. That days have gone, and we now, with people fishing much shorter rods and shorter lines. As I was saying yesterday, I used to be a tackle tester for trout and salmon when they started doing the tackle reviews, and at one time, the first one we ever did, we voted a line with a 75-foot head the best on test. Now, we don't even make lines like that at Mackenzie, and we're probably still, when we launched, we probably are known for being a kind of salmon brand, although now, yeah, absolutely. And now we actually do more single-handers, we do double-handers, because that's the way the kind of, there's a lot more, 10 times the market in single-handers to double-handers, so it's a natural progression for us. So what we're going to do today is kind of show you the different rods. This is the Atlas, the 6-piece, breaks here into that length. So again, we're talking about how people are using 6-piece rod for travelling, but also at home for security reasons in the car. This can be folded away into the car, nobody sees it, and stuff like that. On here we've got one of our new lines, a new NX shooting head line with, we're going to call it the Integra, because it's got an integrated running line. We're going to also do the heads by themselves, because people like to fish different running lines, but this particular model is seamless. It's almost like a spey line. It's got no joins in it, which I think is going to be very, very popular, because there's nothing worse than a loop-the-loop system. When you take the loop through the rings, you get a kind of dink, 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 and it can be quite off-putting. You'll find that too, JT.
Yeah, especially
being
when we
here.
spoke before about some of the older loops that were enormous. They really did make a heavy clunk. They've slimmed them an awful lot more now, and most of the time you hardly recognise that they're there at all.
Absolutely.
But for some people, they're still a bit off-putting.
Yeah, and they can catch a little bit as you're pulling in. So what we've got here, 13.5 foot rods, well 13.7 to be exact, and a shooting head. The shooting head is just over 12 metres, so you're up there sort of high 30 odd foot, just under 40 feet. And this is just a really nice length. The Mackenzie lines tend to be, on paper, maybe a foot or 2 foot longer than other brands, and that's deliberate. And the reason we did that was when people were coming off spay lines, and many years ago too with double taper lines, they found some of the modern day shooting heads just too short. So as you came round, you'd quite often skip your anchor, and the fly line would end up going wet behind you, and the fly line would go behind it, crack, or you're in the trees and the bushes and you're doing pruning all morning rather than fishing. So we deliberately made the lines fraction longer, maybe only that, but that's enough, and very importantly, to get your anchor point to touch the water, kiss the water, and forward. So we'll just stretch out the line and just get a wee bit of casting going. What we'll do there, we're going to start off with the shooting head, and then we'll maybe go on to spay lines, because are you seeing more spay lines getting sold, more shooting heads getting sold as spay lines?
By far and away. I mean, I can remember talking to Chris Ryan, who sorts out the catalogue of several years ago, before Scandi style lines were as massive as they are, and we used to give about 2 pages to traditional spay lines, and we had about half a page for Scandi style shooting heads, and the Scandi style would outsell the 2 pages of spay by about 5 to 1. Now I should think it's way more than that. There's not many manufacturers still make spay lines.
No.
We don't get asked for them very often, but they still definitely have their place in salmon fishing. But from a teaching point of view of a beginner, it's much easier with a shorter head to move and manipulate it than it is 65 feet of line in a more traditional length of spay line.
Absolutely.
They still weigh the same amount, so for argument's sake, 38 grams spread out over 65 feet in a traditional spay, and then you've got, say, 38 grams spread out over 38 to 40 feet in a Scandi style line, or 38 grams in a Skagit spread out over only 24, 26 feet. So they still physically weigh the same and will bend the rod. It's just how that mass is spread out over a shorter or longer distance.
Yeah, and the shorter the head, it's much easier for beginners, or if someone's only fishing maybe 1 week a year. I think we mentioned yesterday as well that when I was full-time gillie in Scotland, you had the same people come year after year, and maybe it was only once a year they fished, and so it always took maybe the best part of the Monday, which was quite often the best day, because it was rested. There's no salmon fishing in Scotland on a Sunday, so it was quite often the best day for fishing. And at that time too, going back a few years now, but there was no netting also around the Scottish coast on the midday and the Saturday to the early Monday morning, so the fish had free passage. So Monday was always the key day. So if you can get your guests, your clients fishing, covering the water, getting up to speed, so to speak,
hit the ground running,
much better. So we now do sell probably 8 times as much shooting heads till we do a spay line, but spay is still got a big place. There's a lot of people that still like their spay lines, and there's nothing nicer, and hopefully we'll be able to see it in camera when we start casting the spay line shortly, is seeing a spay line going out, because fishing is not all about just catching a fish, and there's a great saying, there's more to fishing than catching a fish, and it is. I've been fortunate to fish quite a bit this spring right round Scotland. I was lucky enough I had a fish just the other day, the first one of the season, but I've had about 7 or 8 days, and I've had a fantastic time. And you're there in a beautiful setting, you're fishing well, you're casting the water, and you're covering the water, and you feel, okay, there wasn't a fish there today, but I've covered it well. And you never want to get in a scenario where, if only I could have got that 5 extra yards and cover that fish it was showing. And so if you can cast well, enjoy it, be in beautiful surroundings, if you can enjoy that, you'll never have a bad day on the riverbank. You really won't.
That's for sure. But it also sort of highlights, you're talking about hitting the ground running. If you are that salmon fisherman that only picks up a rod for 1 week a year, or every 18 months, 2 years, there's nothing better than either going and having a lesson, a refresher, or just blowing the cobwebs off and having a couple of hours somewhere like here on a casting platform, just to get the, get those cobwebs out of the way, so that you do get to the river, you hit it running, you're not spending the first day and a half of getting back into the swing of things. But so let's have a look how this one goes on then. Yeah.
So what we've got here is we've got a colour change. We've got the head. Most fly lines nowadays have a colour change in it. This is a shooting head. So with all shooting head lines, you do like that sight sort of hinging. We normally leave a little bit of running line out, so you're just almost about the colour change here. These are the new NX shooting heads. They're just about to come out. They're actually on their way. They'll be here within the week. They'll be in stock, and all stockists, Sportfish here, and all stockists will be carrying them hopefully by the end of next week. And they've gone really, really well. What you're looking for here is a line that's easy to use. It really is. What we were also talking about a little bit yesterday was you want a line that's practical. So you can get some lines, and probably not lines that sell maybe more to the spey lines, and you would have seen this too, JT. They used to get some spey lines that cast beautifully. They keep going, they go forever. If you've got a size 10 stoat tail on the end, put it on a 10-foot fast sinking leader and maybe a little tube, they weren't so good at turning that on. So it's really important that when you're choosing a fly line, you get a line that suits you and the rod. And what we see, you can have the best line in the world, the best rod in the world, but if you don't buy a matched, balanced outfit, it becomes harder work. And you'll see that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not just double-handers, but the same in single-handers.
Same with single-handers, yeah. You get the wrong line for the rod, and that line on a different rod would be perfect, but if they're not matched, then it becomes harder work. It really does.
So with this line, Scotty,
we'll just take it over here and we'll get a wee bit of casting going.
The shooting head style length.
Yep.
You can use this obviously with every single type of spey cast, with a single, double, snake roll, snap tee, exactly the same casting technique, just with the shorter line.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, if you ever see a demonstration with me, and okay, at the end of it, we normally throw a bit of distance, because everyone likes to see a bit of distance going out and seeing a long line. But I always try, and even today when we're doing this, you try and get a few pointers that you can take with you to the riverbank when you do go fishing, and it can be the simplest little things, and it's amazing how many people get the real basics slightly wrong. And that's even how you hold the rod. Now, if you go on like sort of YouTube or any, you'll see how people hold rods, and there's different ways, and you don't have to just cast like Scott Mackenzie, you don't. But what I'll do today, I'll show you really practical ways of getting this rod to work. As I say, let the rod do the work, and we're going to cover that, because it is a fishing rod, is a piece of sporting equipment, and it doesn't matter who has got sporting equipment. It could be a golf club, it could be Tiger Woods, who's back to the Masters. You see him golfing away there, or the different guys, Andy Murray with a tennis racket. And okay, they're good, of course they are. They wouldn't be on, we wouldn't know their names if they weren't, but they're also using the equipment properly. And a fishing rod is the exact same if it's a golf club, or if you're shooting, you're mounting a gun, whatever. How to hold this rod is really important. Now, if you were to say, well, Scott, I've got one of these rods, hopefully it was a Mackenzie, but you've got a double hander. A lot of people would say, right, okay, I'm going to grab the rod there, and I'll grab the rod at the top of the cork handle. Now, this is a new rod because we're at Sportfish, we've still got the plastic on the handle, but don't always assume, which is natural, that you hold the top of the handle, right? Fishing rods come in all different sizes, shapes, size. You go into Sportfish here and there's a Forester rod looking at you, right? So all different shaped handles, different lengths. What you're looking to bend and flex this rod. Now, if you've never been shown, and in casting, is sometimes what we assume would be right often doesn't quite work for us. It really doesn't. So if you were to say, right, yep, Scott, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to there, and my hand's going to go to the top of the handle. Okay. If you did that, okay, you can cast, but you've done two huge errors. Before you even try and get that line out, you're playing catch up. Why? Because if we want to hold the very end of the rod in our hands, right, we want to guide that rod back into position, and that position should be the very end of the line. I'll just line to get it up. We've got a pulley leader on here making it sink just in the lake here. Push the rod out, pull the rod in, okay, down in here. Now, the natural thing, if you were to hold the handle, is to hold it there. And if you were to come round holding it here, this bit will either stick in your jacket or you're twisting your wrist here. Now you do that 500 times a day and you're going to feel that, okay? The second hand is when you put your hand up the rod here and go here to the top of the handle. If you do that and there, and the natural thing, if you're on a river and it's not going out, the natural thing is to think, for some reason your rod doesn't work today and you have to give it a bit of shoulder, a bit of oomph to get it to go out. So the natural thing is to do that. And I've actually seen people almost jumping out the water thinking, I'll try and get the line out, all like that to get the line out. And you know, those stop before you drown yourself jumping up and down in the middle of a Scottish river or wherever you are in the world. It can't be good, because what's happening there is you're doing all the work and not the rod. How do we fix that? It's actually really simple. We want to hold the very end of the rod in our hand, right? Think the gear stick in your car. You want to guide it into control. You wouldn't hold the gear stick like that, would you? Hold the very end, because we're wanting to push out with that bottom hand, pull in with that bottom hand, flexing the rod. Top hand should be the same width as your body and your shoulders. Simple as that. There, there. I'm holding the rod there. Now, does it make a difference holding it there to there? Night and day. Why? Because if I hold it here now, come round, you hear it, whoosh, I can flex the rod. Gone. Move my hand back to where you would think you would be putting it. And it's only a little bit to there. You're doing that. And by the end of the day, that is sore in there. Have you ever been fishing and you said, oh, or the next day you go and see your work colleagues and that, I was fishing yesterday, I've got a bit of a sore shoulder. This rod weighs 8 ounces. It's the same weight as 2 Big Macs. There's nothing
how
on
did
there.
you find that out?
Well, it looks like I've had a couple of Big Macs in my day. There's nothing on here to hurt your arm or your shoulder. There's really not. And if you've got a sore shoulder, and it's really common, you're holding the rod wrongly. It's as simple as that. It really is. So get a grip on the rod, same width as your body and your shoulders, and flex the rod. Push it out with the bottom hand, in there. Where's most of our power coming from? There. You'll always put top hand in. Think of the bottom hand. You're going to push out with that bottom hand and pull back in that bottom hand. There. And that's effortless. And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be kind of taking a big run, a jump, and you know, a Herculean throw to get that line out. Round. And even in the wind here.
Simple.
Simple and effortless, JT. It really is. You'll see that when you were in the casting competition with myself over the years, and you know, and it's not we covered this yesterday a little bit as well. It's not how the bigger you are, the stronger you are, the further you would cast. Quite the opposite. Some of the best casters have actually been on the smaller side rather than the bigger side. It's getting that rod, bend and flex. There's where your power is in that. As soon as you think of giving it and helping it to go out and give a big Herculean throw and do that, it's going nowhere.
Taking the flex out of it.
Absolutely. There's where your power is. The bend and the flex in the rod is where the power is. And that's the difference, you know, if you've got a graphene rod, the tip moves faster than other rods because the graphene speeds up the recovery of the blank. Fly casting is a projectile sport, so if that rod tip moves faster, the line goes faster. If the line goes faster, it's going to go out further or go out easier. That is a given. That's pure physics. It really is. So with a rod like this, and with any of the Mackenzie rods, we always say take your time, let the rod do the work. Go on.
So look, thinking about our casts,
yeah,
you know, when you're getting started in salmon casting, salmon fishing, you've got this plethora of different casts.
Absolutely.
But you might not necessarily know why you use what cast in what situation. So why would you use a single spay over a double spay or a snake roll or a snap tee? just for the guys that are getting started, let's have a look at that then.
To be honest with you, in a nutshell, it's most of the time it's safety. If you, well, we've got head-on wind here now, so we were to say, I was going to do, imagine the river is coming down here, right? So we'll change the line round, and the river's coming down here, and just pull this in. I have to get back in. With all shooting heads, always pull the line back in. None of these modern day shooting heads will work when the running line is out. All you'll get is that, because the running line hasn't got the energy to lift that heavy line out of the back out of the water. So you must always pull it back in to your casting position, which is just about the colour change on the rod. That way you've got all the weight just off the rod tip and it'll cast no problem. So if I was going to do something like a single spay GT, and where the river's coming down here and we've got a wind in their face, what happens is we come round here with a single spay, we're going to lift, we're going to land the line in the water next to ourselves. As it lands, we're back here roughly about a 2 o'clock position. So imagine a clock face, 12 o'clock, back to 2 o'clock, we're roughly about here. So we're back to 2, and what we're going to do, we're going to accelerate to stop at 10 going forward. Now, that's fine, but if we're taking that line round and we're taking the line upstream of ourselves, because the river's coming down here, we're also taking the line upwind of ourselves. So it becomes then quite dangerous, because that fly, I don't know if anyone's ever measured the speed of a fly coming through the air, but it's nipping on, it really, really is. And if there's a chance there, as you go forward, that fly's going to come in, and you might get your ear pierced or something you don't want.
So it's all right with a bit of wool on here, but when you've got a 2-inch brass tube and a treble, it's not so much fun.
Absolutely, it's like a 2-2 bullet going through the air, and I've seen me, my gilling days, standing next to a client, and you're fish away, and if they can't cast a certain way and they have to cast with the wind there, you're kind of casting and ducking, because you know that lump of brass is coming over your head, and so that would be the main thing, is why you would change a cast would normally be for safety because of the wind.
So whether it's upstream wind or downstream wind, whether you're left-hand bank, right-hand bank.
Absolutely. So if we were coming down here, what we would normally say, well then we would then do a cast that would keep the line down downstream of ourselves and downwind of ourselves. Now, because we're on a platform here, it's a little bit, but maybe we can do it. We can simulate it. Maybe if we do it out the front here, we could try and do something. So bear with us. So imagine the river then is coming down here. Let's try it out this way. So the river's coming down here, and if we do a single spay cast, we're with the wind. Okay, there's a fair chance. You like to say, it's just dangerous. You only get one set of eyes, even if you've got Polaroids on. You just don't want to take the risk. So what we do then, rather than having the line in here, we would say, right, okay, well, what can we do? Well, we can change hands to start with. How we stand is also really important in casting. If we're doing a single spay, we'd have our foot, what we call facing our target, facing at the cast angle we're going to cast at. So we're going to lift, sweep round, and as you go forward, your foot, your body, your rod, everything is in direct line. Okay, so we say, well, we can't take the line up here. We're wanting to, and the current swept the line round here. So what we'll do is, I'll just reposition the line, because we've got no flow here because we're on the lake. So imagine the river has come down here. It's floated the line into
we're on the dangle.
corner.
We're
on the dangle, as they say. So what I do is change hands. We always read a river by looking down the river. So if we say that would be the left-hand bank, so we're in the right-hand bank, and the ideal cast in a normal situation would be a single spay off at well, I'm going to cast on my left shoulder. We're looking, coming down, looking down the bank. So that's the left. We're on the right-hand bank here. So we'd be up, round, and across, but we're going to change hands now, because that is dangerous. So we're back into almost dangle. So if we change hands, the wind is coming down here, and then when you're up here, and if you were going to cast there, what you're doing, you know that that's windy, you know the fly is going to come towards you, so what you're like is that, and probably a wee duck in between as well.
We've all seen that.
Absolutely, look at that. So that then is getting more dangerous. What you want is, we'll put the line back again, there. So the lines come round in the dangle, change hands. We're facing our target, both feet. We're going to do a double spay, so we're up. We're going to, now, it's not a lot in casting that I would say is dangerous. But with the double spay, you have to be careful with the double spay. A very popular cast, you have to be careful, because if you go here and you take that line too far up and it goes upstream of yourself, as you come back around, there's a fair chance that line's going to come in
straight up under your chin.
Absolutely, right in the chin. So if you're doing a double spay, always make sure that fly lands at least a rod's length away from yourself, downstream of yourself. Really, not much things in casting that are really important, but that's a biggie because it's dangerous if it goes too far up. If that fly goes any more up than direct length from you, just stop the cast, reposition it, and start all over again. For all the time it'll take, it's better than having, again, a wee bit of an accident. So we're up, we're over, we're sweeping round. Now we're going to harness this wind. We formed our big D loop, so rather than kind of thinking, right, I'm going to duck, quite the opposite now. We've got the wind blowing down here and we're going to harness that wind. We're going to come back to form that D loop again, and we're going to allow the wind actually is now your friend. You're harnessing that wind. Okay. So reposition it back there a wee bit, just a wee snake roll, just to put it back into position. So we're up, we're round, form your D loop, and flex.
Beautiful.
All we want to do. Now, no one, as we covered yesterday, no one knows who invented spay casting round about the mid 1800s, probably on the River Spey, because it was tree lined, overgrown, and if you're doing an overhead cast, you're going to hook the trees, the bushes, whatever behind you. So spay casting was created a way of, regardless of what's behind you, you can fish down any pool because your fly is always landing on the water next to you, forming a lovely big D loop, and away it goes. Okay. Now, fly fishing equipment has evolved, and so has casting over the years. And what we're seeing now is lots of other casts coming in, and some are good, some are not so good. But one I do like, if we're doing an alternative, we can't do a single spay cast here. Rather than doing a double spay is fine, okay, it's good cast, but there, round, you get that big slurp coming off the water. It could just make a difference. You're all right fishing down the pool because your fly is fishing 30 yards or whatever below that. So as your line comes round, you're casting, fine. But if you've got someone coming behind you, or you're going to fish a pool down twice, you are disturbing the pool slightly. The cast I do prefer, and it's a modern cast, is the snake roll. So we'll just position the line back down there. So what we're going to do, we're going to lift, we're going to come in towards the bank we're standing on, we're going to throw the rod out, round, and one movement, bring the line down. That's a modern cast, a really good one.
It's such a graceful cast, but it also really loads the rod well.
Absolutely, and it's effortless. It's taking your time with the cast, you know, because again, if you've never fished, you think it's really, really quick and you have to do things really, really quickly. As long as you've got tension in that line, you've got masses and masses and masses of time. So we're up, and what we're going to create here is almost like an oval shape. We're going to come in, we're going to throw the rod out and bring it back in. Okay. Now, we don't want to create too much of a circle, because if we create a circle, one of the things to remember is the fly line will always follow exactly where the tip of the rod goes. So anything we do with the tip of the rod direct fits the line. So we go round and drop down too much, we throw the line out onto the water, we get too much of an anchor point. It's all about getting a small anchor point and a bigger the D loop you can, the better. The bigger the D, the more line, more it loads the rod, more it loads the rod. In a projectile sport that is, more further it's going to go. So if we just do here, if we keep it slightly more rugby ball shape, up, round, forward.
Lovely.
Effortless and smooth. And if it is a fluency, would be the word you would use in casting. Where there's nothing too quick. There's no, just take your time. You've got massive time. This style of casting probably lends itself what we're just there, snake rolls and that, skagits, Do you like the sort of snap tee and the circle
I
tee?
love it.
Do you try a wee bit of casting, JT?
Love a snap tee. Love a snake roll.
Yep.
I'm quite a modern, lazy kind of caster. I just find it so much easier to do the snap tees.
Yep.
Because it creates so much speed. I know, as you say, it does create that bit of a slap, but you know, the snake rolls can create a huge amount of line speed.
It really does. If something's going to go wrong in a spey cast, it's quite often your anchor point. If you don't get the anchor up far enough, you're playing catch up a wee bit. If you get it too much, you can skip your anchor. And where JT's landing there is absolutely perfect. You want to land the line just upstream of you, a bit of rod length away from yourself. And I remember fishing in Norway, it's about 8 or 9 years ago. And I had my son with me. He was only a young teenager at the time, and he doesn't fish a lot. And what can happen if you don't get your anchor in the right place, you don't set it up right, you can quite often catch a line going forward. And one thing you shouldn't do is try and teach a family member probably to drive or to fly.
Definitely not. No wives, girlfriends, children. It's just going to end in tears.
It's good at it, and you know, and he was catching line going forward. There's nothing worse, because if you've got a fly and you see that line catching there, you're either going to get a wind knot, or if you're fishing with a fly with a long tail, maybe a kind of cascade or alley shrimp, or even a sort of sunray shadow, one of the modern day kind of stripping flies, it's going to catch up in the hook. So every time you do cut your shell going forward, it's almost essential that you check the fly, and it's quite frustrating if you're doing it every cast. And it was almost spoiling the hole, and I said to my son, go into a circle C, up, round. He got his anchor in the right place, away he went, and he enjoyed his fishing, and we started catching fish, and it actually saved the holiday. It really, really did, you know. And so it's always got a place in my heart that thinking, well, if things are not working, certainly the snap tee, circle C. I prefer the circle C to the snap tee, because do a snap for me on that's a circle. Do a little bit more of a snap for me if you can, up and more kind of.
Bit lower?
Yeah, just a wee bit lower and a little bit more of a snap. Just a little bit if you can. Now if you listen to this, I don't know if you heard that on the camera. Do one more, JT, you're going to hear a noise here. Aye, perfect. Now, what I don't like about snap tee, which is popular, is when you hear that at the end there like that, I've seen when I've been guiding a lot of flies getting cracked off, or you weaken the knot because that line is going back and then coming forward. If you've got a wee bit of weight on the end of that, it's putting that, literally what they call the snap, into it, right? Circle C is a much better cast because it's smooth, it's round, it's coming out, especially if you've got a bigger fly, it's much easier taking that fly out of the water. If your rod tip's going like that and round, much easier taking that heavier line and fly out of the water doing that.
You accentuate how far, don't you? So instead of that snap there, just as you say, with a heavier fly or a big sinking tip, just go up, and then the path of the fly line on the top leg is so much further away from the rod tip, you're never going to collide either. Absolutely.
And if you're fishing with Skagit lines, which are getting more popular, it's a great cast to do, the Circle C and stuff like that. When you've got heavy tip maybe on the end, a big fly, the Circle C is the way to go for sure.
Such a lovely, lovely cast to do. And the thing is the other thing that people have the problem with is that they come up and they snap back so hard, not only can they crack it off, but their fly and their belly of the line is not far enough upstream of them. And you end up with that line there, and if I come back round to do my sweep here, that fly line is going to grip like the proverbial to a blanket. So if you use much softer hands, because once you've lifted the line off the water, you're actually not moving anything. You've got very little resistance. You've got a long rod, and it's just going to follow the path of the rod tip. So it's quiet, it's easy. Then you've got the grip of the water, and your fly is placed in the right place, out of your way, nice and safe for that wind, and you can then pop it out a very long way very easily.
Perfect. So we're just coming to an end now, guys. What we've had here was the Integra shooting head, the new one that's just coming out. We're going to do them the Integra is the one with the running line. We'll do the NX shooting heads, and we've got the NX spey lines also coming out. They'll be in an 8-9 for a 50-foot head, a 9-10 will be a 55-foot head, and then when we get into the 10-11 models, we do a 55 and a 65. I say shooting heads are hugely popular now, but there is still a place. Because we're Scottish, the heritage, a lot of boys still come to us for spey lines. They do still like the spey lines, especially the slightly shorter ones. Like you say, the days of 75, 85 feet, I think are gone. But a short-headed spey line, and you see it casting out, is a thing of beauty. It really, really
Definitely
is.
still has its place.
Oh yeah, for sure. But if you have any questions, please put any questions into the feed. We'll try and answer them. I've got a plane to catch in about 2 hours' time, so hopefully Heathrow is not too busy today.
No, hopefully you're okay.
It's fantastic coming down to Sportfish here. They've got absolute fantastic facility here where you can come and try out the rods and lines and stuff like that. The guys on hand are all fishermen. They're all experts and are keen fishermen, which is always really, really important when you're getting good advice on what tackle. GT as well, perfect for saltwater fishing, expert in the saltwater stuff. So you've got a lot of guys down here who really know their stuff in the different fields, which is really important as well. Well, GT, I can't but thank you for having us back down here again, buddy.
So much,
it's great just getting back after COVID and
bit
getting
of
back.
bit of normality. No, it's been brilliant, having you, Scotty. You know, we've had a great time looking at the rods. Now just looking at a bit of casting, why you do what you do when you do it.
Yeah.
Whether the wind's upstream, downstream, left shoulder, right shoulder. You know, safety obviously being paramount. Always wearing your glasses. You know, for any of you newbie salmon anglers or guys that are unsure, I hope you've picked up a few hints and tips there. That's the end of this live stream. We've got loads more coming out throughout the rest of the day, so stay tuned. Plenty to come.
Cheers. Bye bye.